Hello and welcome to this interview. Today I'm joined by independent researcher and lawyer Lubhyathi Rangarajan. Thank you so much, ma'am, for agreeing to do this interview. She has been working for the past 6 months on a project in collaboration with Article 14 to collate data on rising sedition cases in this country for the past few years. Ma'am, can you please tell us what is this project all about? What do you want to achieve with this project?
Thank you, Shubham. The inspiration for this project is the idea that the process is the punishment. This is an idea that has been in existence for many decades. It's not something that we have invented. It's something that social scientists have been studying for a long time. And what we mean by it is that the legal process punishes an individual in many steps along the way. It is not just the final judgment of the court. What we have done is to combine this now with the increasing instances of sedition being filed, because the complication with sedition is also the tag that is put on you of either Deshdrohi or anti-national. And this sort of complicates the legal process as well, where the pre-trial process, what we call the time before the case actually gets into a trial stage, before the courts adjudicate. The pre-trial process is where we find many cases being stuck or cases being filed, people being arrested and put in prison for many days and months without any solid basis. So the inspiration for this project is very much to combine this idea of the process is the punishment and look at it with sedition, to sort of document how these cases are rising, who is being charged with these cases, where are they from, what is the kind of lawyering they have or don't have. And this is what we intend to achieve, and this we hope to make available to the general public, because it is an issue that affects everyone. It is not really few people, it's all of us who use social media, especially, who are all impacted by a law like this. It is not just a law for a few people and not for others.
So as per your findings and reports, I have the data that says that around 96% of sedition cases for criticizing politicians and the government over the last decade were registered after 2014. The other figure also, the same report says that 65% of nearly 11,000 individuals in 816 sedition cases since 2010 were implicated after 2014. Can you please throw some light on this?
Right. So these are two distinct sets of data, of course. The first being the 65% figure of 11,000 individuals. One is when we say 11,000 individuals, we also clarify that this includes, in fact, unidentified persons. Okay. And it is something that is increasingly being used in FIR. So, for example, the police will, in the FIR, after, let's say, a big protest or a big sort of gathering, people raising slogans, protesting against a certain law, the police might file an FIR saying 3,000 unknown people present at the protest, and that's about it, right? So they will not name people. What they might possibly do is later on in the process of investigation, then begin to arrest people and add their names to the FIR. And this is something we have seen. So the 11,000 figure does include thousands of people who have not been named, but who have clearly been indicated in documents as having been unidentified, and we don't actually know when they were arrested, when they were picked up, and how many, and if so, what happened to them. So 65% of them, it's also in correlation with the number of cases we saw, right? So in UPA 2, we saw about 280 cases of sedition, compared to after 2014 until now, we've seen about 500, more than 500 cases. So it sort of coincides also with that figure. Now, the 96% for criticizing politicians and governments, this also includes many agitations that have happened in the last 6 years. So there are a couple of things. One is you have specific events that trigger sedition cases, like the anti-CA protests and like the Pathal Gadi movement that happened in Jharkhand. Those are the two sort of big events that have happened in the last 6 years. The other sort of non-event related sedition cases are directly related to saying something about the chief minister or the prime minister. And this may have nothing to do with a specific event or a specific protest. It may just be a tweet, it may be a sort of pamphlet. But a lot of these cases arose from the anti-CA protest and the Pathalgadi movement. And you may also notice that we've included COVID-19 related cases as well as Hathras, where there were attempts to file multiple FIRs, again against unidentified persons, to say there is a conspiracy to defame the government. So the figure of 96%, there is a reason it is that high, is because there is a sort of tendency to file sedition cases even in that have no connection to, say, an anti-CA protest or a big sort of gathering. These are all ordinary citizens who have just used social media, perhaps without thinking of what they were doing, and saying something without realizing they would face a sedition case.
So, are there any particular states or part of this country where the surge in sedition cases have been seen as per your studies?
Yes. So in our study, we found that we had the top five states in India. One was Bihar. So Bihar was actually leading the way in terms of number of sedition cases filed across 10 years, fairly consistently, I might add. We haven't investigated into exactly the causes of Bihar, also because this is another finding from our study, is that things tend to be reported differently from different states. So national coverage on Bihar and what happens there is very limited in terms of compared to, say, Uttar Pradesh, where there's very intense media coverage around Uttar Pradesh as a state generally and what happens there. So it's followed very closely by journalists. Bihar, what we saw was mostly around left-wing extremism and about 20% related to anti-CA or, again, criticism of government or specific government policies. This was again followed by Tamil Nadu. Now, Tamil Nadu, the surge was again responsible. The reason for the surge is because of the Kudankulam protest that happened almost a decade ago under a very different regime. But, very similar to what we're seeing now, hundreds of sedition cases filed against, entire villages in that area because they were demonstrating against the nuclear plant. So Tamil Nadu would be the second in terms of number of cases over a decade, and then followed by Uttar Pradesh, Jharkhand, and Karnataka. So these are the sort of top five states we've seen from our study.
So would it be right to say, as per the analysis of your study, that sedition cases have increased in the past few years as compared to UPA era? Why I'm saying is because your study also says that there has been an increase of 28% filed cases. So has there been an increase?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. There is a huge increase in the number of sedition cases being filed, which needs to be looked at in combination with social media as well. I think that is a big part of how people are expressing themselves these days. And many sedition cases are filed after somebody has posted on Facebook, Twitter, shared something on WhatsApp, videos again are forwarded, videos of speeches are made. These are then forwarded, on the basis of which a sedition case is filed. And of course, very recently, we know that the Delhi police has filed an FIR against the creators of a toolkit, again unknown. Nobody has been named in that FIR. So one is, again, like I said, I would go back to the event sort of analysis. And, I think here, while we see a few events that trigger sedition cases, typically, what we're also seeing is in the middle of big events, there are also many cases filed that are non-event related, right? So, like I said, for some sort of tweet or some sort of criticism against a minister, that has nothing to do with sort of large scale protests that have been organized.
So
it's
random.
Right. So there are there are many random cases, of course, around seemingly anti-national behavior, either criticizing a politician, supporting one country over your own country. So these are the kinds of things we've seen, particularly around the cricket match, right? So when India lost to Pakistan in 2017, there were sedition cases filed around that time, allegedly because people were celebrating in favor of that India lost the match.
No.
So these are some of the things we do see. And now you can't say this is sort of related to a protest or something like that, right? I mean, it's a very sort of coordinated effort to penalize certain kinds of behavior.
So if I'm right in understanding from the study that sedition cases have increased as compared to UPA era and since Narendra Modi, Prime Minister Narendra Modi took to office, what are the reasons for that? Why have sedition cases increased?
I suppose your guess is as good as mine here. I think it is the reality of the times we're in. I think priority, I mean, the kinds of people you have in power and the kinds of governments we have in power clearly see this as an opportunity to harass people who are just doing their jobs, like journalists, like politicians, students, activists, and ordinary people. And this is where things sort of intersect with the legal process, because not only is it that you can file multiple FIRs for the same tweet in multiple states, for the exact same tweet. I mean, why is it necessary to do that? It's almost as if they've realized, or there's a realization that this is a good way to make sure people don't say something that they shouldn't be saying. So the of course the other thing is that so much of the data we found was possible because of digitization of records post 2016. It's before 2016 there was very few records available in terms of just digitizing these
Okay, so that's also
FIRs or
important
case
point, yeah.
records. So, but I would still say that the way in which it's being used now is still nowhere close to what was being done under UPA. For example, if you remember, there was the Lokpal protest, India Against Corruption, very organized, peaceful protests that were being organized at the time. And Asim Trivedi was a cartoonist who was then jailed in 2012. And there was so much public sort of outcry against why is it that he has been charged with sedition? And, so there was a lot of that. And there was a certain reaction by the then government who sort of felt, okay, maybe this outcry is something we need to deal with. I think now that's not even the case. I mean, there's really, even if there's outcry, how can you file sedition cases against so many journalists? How can you file in multiple states identical complaints in those police stations? And it's not that they're engaging with that public outcry. It's not that they feel this is, oh, we may have stepped over the mark. So the reactions of both regimes have been very, very different. And I think, yeah, this is just the reality of who's governing us and who's in power in the center and the states. Yeah.
So, would it be right to say that sedition laws and sections of IPC are being misused and the power is being abused? And if so, what's the way forward? How do you look at it, the law itself?
It is being abused. It is being misused. So sedition. So there are a couple of things. I mean, one is, of course, you have written law in your book, right? I mean, you have a book like the Indian Penal Code. It tells you this is the punishment, this is the offense, this is the punishment for it. Similarly with sedition, right? Now, the Supreme Court has reinterpreted this. So typically, judges will sort of reinterpret this law and tell you, okay, this is the limitation. This is where someone can be punished. This is where someone can't be punished. And this is because judges have to deal with these cases as they come before them. So judges understand what are the kinds of evidence you need, what is the kind of sort of, in order to make that case strong. So what's happened with sedition is that though the law sort of, when you read the law, in the IPC, it says anyone who excites disaffection against the government, right? Again, not defined. But what the Supreme Court has done in 1962 is to sort of say, everything cannot be excitement to disaffection. You cannot punish everyone for criticizing. You cannot punish people for raising slogans. So what did they do? They said the limitation is incitement to violence. So whatever you're doing, however you're expressing yourself, it has to lead to some sort of violence, and again, not defined. the code did not define incitement to violence, right? Because this is something that only on the ground the judge might be able to look at the evidence and do. So the way forward really is, at least, at the very least, the police stations need to be made aware of this limitation on sedition, which is that what you are doing, what you say, a placard that you're holding up, has to lead to some sort of incitement to violence. It cannot just be that you're shouting a slogan and an FIR is filed against you and you are arrested, and etc., etc., because the Supreme Court has made it very clear that you cannot do that. There has to be an element of, because otherwise everything is sedition, right? All criticism is sedition, all sort of raising slogans, anyone holding a poster, anyone sort of saying something independently, even without being part of any group. And this is what we're seeing anyway. So we are seeing FIRs being filed against completely non-violent expressions, and this is completely against what the Supreme Court has said. So at the very, very least, there should be some sort of guidelines or some sort of regulation that the police needs to be made aware of, that this is not sedition. There is no incitement to violence, and there is no sort of damage that has occurred because of that particular tweet.
Yeah. Ma'am, my last question is, would you please tell us, how did you collate the data? What was the methodology? How did you have the access to all the data? Because it tells about the credibility of the data. So can you please throw some light on that?
Right, of course. So our methodology was that we used all mostly open access government websites, right? So these are state police departments. So every state government has their own police department citizen portal, right? What they call a citizen portal, where you can do multiple things on that police website. One of those things says view FIR. So you can actually look at first information reports. The second source we used was the e-courts, or the judiciary has, again, their own set of open access government websites, free to use, anyone can use them. This is the district court level, high court level, and the Supreme Court. These are all open to the public. There are many ways in which you can filter out data based on whatever search term you used. Of course, we would use the word sedition, or we would say 124A IPC, right, which is the name of the section. So we use these sorts of government resources, and of course, we also used media reports. So it was a combination of, also, so often we would find the media report, and then we would find actually also the case document from the court website. So it was sort of, collaborated, they gave credit to our findings, even from the media. So we used a lot of media reports extensively across different languages, Hindi and Punjabi and Tamil. And of course, the other interesting thing is how the term sedition is again translated. And almost every Indian language, including Kannada and Tamil and Hindi and many languages, it's Deshdrohi. It's a form of Deshdrohi. So it's Deshdroham or Rajya Droham or Deshdroha, in the sort of headline of the media report. So, we use these sort of keywords and key phrases in order to collate all these sources. But we relied majorly on government websites, which are open access.
So all the data is available from the open access.
That's right. We also used, India Kanun, again, a very popular website for lawyers, again, completely open access. So there is nothing that we used here that was sort of not something that
so
anyone
it was very transparent method.
Yeah, we receive data from these websites, and we had to then, of course, analyze it in our own way. But the data was collected from all of these open access sources. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you so much.
Logical India.